So the day of the raid finally comes. The raid's going to start on October 16th of 1859. It's a Sunday. This is day one, and this is going to be happening at night, obviously. He's trying to, be all sneaky and stuff. So John Brown leaves 4 of his men, sort of as like a backup rear guard there, and he takes the rest of his men and he leads everyone else into the town of Harper's Ferry, Virginia. And the first place they go is to the home of Colonel Lewis Washington, who is a military colonel there in Virginia. He's actually the great-grandnephew of General George Washington, President George Washington. So they take some of Lewis Washington's slaves and get them to go with them, free his slaves, and they even actually steal a sword that had belonged to George Washington that had been given to him by Frederick the Great, and they steal 2 guns that had been given to George Washington by Marquis de Lafayette, if you remember him, back from Unit 2. So they capture a bunch more people, but they start thinking, as they go on, they're going to need more weapons. So that's what they set out to do at that point. So they actually cut telegraph wires in Harper's Ferry so that no one in Harper's Ferry can call out for help. That's sort of like a sociopathic type of thing to do, but that's what they do. Sort of smart, but sort of crazy. And they seize a train. They capture this train and they get on the train and they're like, everybody get off, and we're setting all the slaves free, and we're taking over the town, blah, blah, blah. And a free black man named Hayward Shepherd actually steps up to them and is like, nah, y'all are not going about this the right way, and you need to calm down. We don't need any violence here. And they shoot and kill Hayward Shepherd because, to John Brown, it didn't matter if you were black, white, green, or purple. If you were against him, then you were against him, and you had to get out of the way. You had to go. So Hayward Shepherd is actually the first casualty of the raid at Harper's Ferry. When he confronts them, they shot and kill him on the train. So word exactly doesn't spread like John Brown wants it to. He wants word to get around, like, hey, this guy is freeing all the slaves, blah, 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 and to get around really fast so that all the slaves will leave their plantations and escape and come and join him. But that doesn't happen. So he doesn't get that massive slave uprising that first night like he wants to. So, remember I told you he thought he was going to get like 200 to 500 slaves night one? That does not even come close to happening. But he does manage to finally capture an armory. So the next morning, day 2, October 17th, which is Monday morning, some army workers find where John Brown and his people are, and they surround them at the armory that they're at. And there's some shooting takes place back and forth. And in the midst of the shooting, 4 people get shot and killed, including the mayor of Harper's Ferry. So now several people have been murdered in all of this. John Brown realizes that he's trapped. He takes 9 people hostage and runs to a smaller house further away, an engine house that is later on going to be referred to. You see it here on the map right here. It says engine house, this little black thing right here. That is going to essentially be John Brown's fort. So he sends one of his sons, Watson, and another man out with a white flag to sort of, say, the white flag means, we're giving up, we're surrendering, we want to come peacefully. But the soldiers, when he comes out, they don't see the white flag right away, and they end up shooting and killing Watson. And the other dude is also shot and captured. So John Brown's son is killed, and John Brown is, just like absolutely distraught, and people are starting to freak out that are with him, and they're like, oh my God, we are all going to be killed. Frederick Douglass was right. We're never going to make out of this alive. One guy tries to, get away and escape by swimming across the Potomac River. But look at this. Look at how big this is. This is a massive, massive river, and there's no way that someone could just like swim across it super easily. So the guy tries to start swimming across the river. He gets shot and killed. Eventually, John Brown's other son, Oliver, he's also shot and killed. So around 3 o'clock in the afternoon on that second day, a militia comes in from Martinsburg, Virginia, and they force John Brown and all of his people into the fort, and they bunker down. The militia manages to break into the fort, and they're fighting with John Brown and his guys. They manage to get free about 25 of the people that are there, and 8 of those militia are wounded, but then they have to get out. So Buchanan is hearing about all this, and he orders the Marines to go in and march onto Harper's Ferry and end this whole situation. So the Marines are going to be led by one Robert E. Lee. So if his name sounds familiar to you, it is because Robert E. Lee is one of the greatest military minds to ever live. The man was a military genius, and he is going to be the leader of the Confederate Army during the Civil War. And we're going to see a excellent showdown between him and the Union general at the end of the war. But Robert E. Lee was a great, very, very intelligent guy, excellent military leader. So Robert E. Lee goes in. He actually got the order so fast and ran to Harper's Ferry so quickly that when he got there, he was wearing civilian clothes. Like, he wasn't even wearing his uniform or his fatigues. He was just wearing I'm just hanging out my t-shirt and jeans type of deal. Obviously, he wasn't wearing a t-shirt and jeans, but you know what I mean. The 1859 or 57 equivalent of a t-shirt and jeans. So they get there very, very late that night. The next morning, October 18th, the third day, Tuesday, Robert E. Lee sends a man to negotiate with him, with John Brown, sends a man to with a white flag, saying, I'm coming in peace, I just want to talk, and tries to negotiate with them to surrender. Now, Robert E. Lee knows that he knows John Brown at this point, and he knows that he's going to refuse, but he wants to give John Brown the opportunity to surrender anyway. So, but as predicted, John Brown refuses. And so the Marines storm the fort, and it only takes Robert E. Lee and his 10 Marines 3 minutes to capture John Brown and every single one of those raiders. They use a ladder as a battering ram, and they break down the door and get in. 3 minutes, they've got every single person, captured and arrested. So John Brown is tried for treason against the state of Virginia, found guilty, and sentenced to death, and he's hung and executed on December 2nd. So everyone in the North, all these abolitionist groups, they see John Brown as this martyr. He was a hero. He tried to save the slaves. He tried to end slavery, and he sacrificed, he was willing to sacrifice it all. He sacrificed himself to make that happen, because he knew, that he was arrested, that he would probably be killed. At the same time, people in the South are like, this dude is a madman. He's a murderer. He cut telegraph wires so people couldn't call for help. Like, that's a sociopathic thing to do. And he is just sort of like the embodiment of a frightening, mad, crazy person just run amok trying to destroy the South and, end slavery. So they blame the abolitionists and the Republicans for all of this. They say, if it wasn't for abolitionists, none of this would have happened. None of those people would have gotten killed, and this whole thing never would have gone down. So that is the story of John Brown.